Morning, Mel. This is a response to your video that I watched this morning. I can't remember what it was called, to be honest with you, but it was something like Backseat Driving the Mind, something like that. It was a great video again, I mean, what prompted me to think about making a response was because it kind of coincided with one or two other videos I've been watching and some other stuff I've been thinking about. And your video kind of usefully augmented that and took it on the stage. I mean, specifically the one that led me to think about yours was one I was watching by a user called Leeward Thief that I made a response to, and which was in turn a response to a set of other conversations that I wasn't part of. But what he was saying in that video, he's talking about mind-body dualism, you know, the kind of philosophical sense that we all have, or that some philosophical traditions have at least, that we have this body and that's one thing, and then we have this mind and that's completely different. It's not you know, well supported by any kind of science or modern philosophy, but it's got a long tradition in you know, just the philosophy of mind more generally. Specifically Descartes, the philosopher Descartes, who I guess was the first to kind of nail it to the wall, you know what I mean, and make it identifiable. And this video Leeward Thief was talking about, and that I responded to, as I say, was talking about how we think about that, analogies for that, metaphors for that. Specifically, what he called the car driver analogy. So you're still thinking about these two things, you know, body and the mind, or the body-brain thing, and then the mind, which someone had said that Leeward Thief was responding to, is a bit like a car and a driver. So the body and the brain, the whole material substance, is the car, and then the mind is like the driver of the car. Now it's a really problematic analogy for all kinds of reasons. It leads to an infinite regress, because you've got to think, what's the driver's mind like then? Has the driver got a mind, and inside the driver's mind is there another driver, and so on. But putting that aside, you know, it feels intuitively right, I think, which is why people do discuss it in those kind of terms. You know, because there's a really nice little book by a guy called Paul Bloom, a book called Descartes' Baby that I talked about a while back. It's a really nice little book, actually, it's great. But he talks about that in that. He says we're all natural born dualists, even though, you know, we can read the scientific literature or we can think seriously about this stuff, and we can kind of know that the idea that we have this material body and this immaterial mind that kind of drives it around, even though we know that that's intellectually that's wrong, it feels right. You know, it's intuitively accurate, in the sense that, you know, we all feel that way. And kids feel that way, apparently. You know, if you talk to very young children, that's the kind of logic they seem to derive first. So there's something, as I say, appealing about that model, even though it's obviously not correct, or it's only partial or something, anyway. So yeah, you got this driver. The way I visualise it actually is in that film Men in Black, the first one, not the sequel, where the ambassador from some star system, I can't remember, gets killed in this restaurant. And when he's taken to the morgue, I don't know if you know the film Men in Black, he gets taken to the morgue and they press a little thing behind his ear, click, and his whole face just goes this. It kind of comes off and it's revealed as a machine, really. And inside his head there's this little alien guy, this huge bulbous head, just kind of working the controls like this. And then he dies. But it's that kind of an image, you know, that you've got a driver inside your mind, inside your brain. Which feels right, but isn't probably right at all. But the fact that we, as Paul Bloom says, we are natural born dualists, that we do have this sense of dualism, that we do feel that we are meat machines being driven around by immaterial drivers, is very, very compelling. A compelling illusion, you might even say. And that illusion, the driver in that illusion, that feeling of this person that we are, that's sitting in our brains, driving us around, is usually a very particular kind of driver. You know, the kind of... Sorry, I'm getting to your video in a minute, I promise, Mel. That it's a very particular kind of driver. It's usually a driver which is singular and which is unified. The philosopher Immanuel Kant calls it transcendental unity. That although that our... I can repurpose what he's really meant in modern terms. Even though we've got all these different processes going on in our brains and our bodies, and you know, of what our visual information is being processed in this part of the brain, our auditory information is being processed in this part of the brain, and it's all scattered and there's all these different processes. It doesn't feel like that. It feels unified. Somehow all these processes come together to produce either the illusion, if you want to look at it that way, or the useful fiction of a unified self that, as I say, sits up there in our brain and steers us around. Another writer, Steven Pinker, no it wasn't, it was Antonio Damasio, that's right, who I've been talking about. Another writer called Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist, compares it to an orchestra. He doesn't use the driver thing, he compares it to an orchestra. That you've got the brain playing all these different instruments, improvising the tune as it goes along, but somehow they all come together to make a single melody, the melody of lived experience. And not only that, but these functions seem to produce the illusion of a composer, you know. So we feel as if our brain's got a composer, a kind of master in control, an executive system in control of that, you know, just a variant on the driver thing really. Okay, so we've got this driver thing. It's produced somehow by some process that's going on in our brains that unites all these different processes. We have this sense of either an orchestra leader in our brains that's guiding our lives, and it is ourselves in some meaningful sense, or we get this illusion of a driver produced out of all these different processes, which again we feel is ourselves, and that's us sitting there in the driving seat of our bodies and driving ourselves through our world. But it can go wrong, and it can go wrong in quite systematic ways and organised ways. And what you're describing, I think, is a really interesting example of that. I don't mean to offend by referring to a condition which is obviously troubling as interesting, but I'm sorry, it just is interesting. Because what you seem to be describing, and it's fascinating, you use the same analogy, the driver analogy and the car analogy. What you seem to be describing is a condition in which, yes, there's all these functions going on, but rather than all these functions resolving into the single mental impression of there being a single driver, which is yourself, driving yourself through life, yours seems to be functioning in a way which occasionally places you either in the passenger seat or else crowds the car out with a multitude of other voices, backseat drivers. So rather than achieving this kind of what Kant calls, as I say, the transcendental unity, this sense of a single mind propelling us through the world, like the little guy in Men in Black, in that body in Men in Black, you have a series of competing voices, which can be troubling, I'm sure. Yeah. There's other variants as well, though, isn't there? I mean, there's things I've been looking at lately, Mel, is to do with meditation and those kind of practices, where the quest is to, I'm not sure if it's a quest, but one of the features is that you recognise the illusion of that driver, or possibly even dispense with it, possibly even move past it, so that you recognise these individual processes for what they are, and kind of disassemble them, and reveal the illusory processes that work there in the construction of what we think of as these unified, whole, healthy selves. And yeah, that's all I can do right now. My hand's freezing actually holding this camera. It's quite cold here in Cornwall, but beautiful. I'll just show you the scenery again. I'm just walking on the cliff edge here, which I like doing. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at that. I love the way that path over there zigzags up the side of that hill. I'm going to walk up there in a second, then I'll turn around and go back, go to work. Yeah. Thanks very much. Bye.